Good evening, and we're on, right? Good evening, guys. Apologies for the slight delay. It's always interesting times here with Anoa and Progressive Army and our technology. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday evening special edition Progressive Army production. We are we're here live. This is the first of 5 panels, as I talked about last night on the Benjamin Dixon Show. Basically, Sean King has done a series of articles, right, about thinking about, not just let me report on one more case, but really looking at what can be done. What are some of the solutions? What are some of the issues? Like, how can we really start putting together action items that we all can do wherever we are, on a national scale to really move the needle and create a critical mass in this issue that has kind of really grabbed our attention over the past 2 to 3 years. Police violence and looking at it within the framework of systemic racism overall. So as I explained, we have our team of researchers and writers here at Progressive Army. We have our show hosts. All of us have been in discussion groups and conversations, since Sean started this project. And we've been discussing, like many of you, we've been discussing this, we all discuss it, right? It's, especially in the past few weeks, it seems to be things we're discussing besides the election, but that's a whole nother topic for another conversation another time. But we wanted to be able to add space for different voices to come together to really start, out some of the issues, parceling out some of, there are a lot of concepts out there, right? There are a lot of issues, there are a lot of occurrences happening, and there's a lot of nuance captured in these sound bites when you see a news story or when you see a Twitter beef between people or however you're getting your information about these instances. So we want to bring together activists, we want to bring together community members. We want to bring together, former law enforcement officers. We want to bring together people who have been active and engaged in different aspects of this work over, whatever portion of their career to really provide voice that is not necessarily being represented by mainstream coverage of these topics. And we wanted to also reach out to people that maybe wouldn't ordinarily have their voices heard because they're maybe not that it organization that is getting all of the coverage as well. So we cast a wide net, and tonight I'm very excited to be joined by Michael A. Woods Jr. and Dr. Karen Johnson. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about their individual work. We hope to still be joined by Roy Tatum in a little bit, but so in thinking about, this conversation and this topic that we're having tonight, we thought about setting these up into 5 specific, panels that this conversation is kind of like just like a general framing, of talking about a whole host of issues. And we again later on the other 4 panels, and it's not that these are the only 4 panels, the only 5 panels we're going to do, but this is where we thought was the best place to start. And like I said, definitely want to get to know more about our panelists and the work they've been doing and their take on some of the issues that is facing our country today. So I will start with Dr. Johnson, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you.
Okay. I will start with Michael, only because my producer has informed me that Dr. Johnson's not on the screen yet. So, Michael, how are you? You are a very awesome person to follow on Twitter. I just want to...
Oh, really? I appreciate that. I never know how to really quite deal with any of the compliments on what I do. I guess what I do is so, I don't know, dark and dealing with problem things that you just,
right.
You take all the hits and you don't see any of the victories. So I don't know. Thanks for saying that. But anyway, so I was a Baltimore police sergeant for 11 years, doing different supervisory things there. I was a major case narcotics detective. And to make it as short as possible, I eventually ended up setting myself towards the scholarly endeavors to try and write policing. But then in the midst of those scholarly endeavors, Black Lives Matter came to the rise, and the deaths of Tamir Rice and Freddie Gray just really struck me, not just intellectually, but emotionally. I've never been able to get past, especially Tamir's murder.
Right.
And now I see myself as setting the goal to try and figure out what these reforms are and how we take policing to the next level, reforming it in whatever, however we break that discussion down.
Great, great. Thank you. Dr. Johnson, how are you?
I'm doing well, Noah, and thank you so much for the work that you do and for allowing me to join you this evening. And
well, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And Michael Wood, shout out to you. So my name is Dr. Karen Johnson, and I'm chair of the Black Alliance of Thurston County. We formed in 2005 after 2 young Black men were shot in Olympia, Washington. Thank God they were not killed. We can only wonder if they were shot at all, though, is because they were Black. We wonder if they were white, if the result would have been the same. And so the police chief wanted to get together and meet with Black leaders in the community to begin having conversations around institutional racism. And before we met with the chief of police, though, we, the Black leaders, did get together and decided, first of all, we knew the young Black men were going to be charged. That pretty much is the MO. Shoot us. If we live, we're charged with assault. So we really weren't going to get caught up in whether or not the police officer was charged or whether the young men were charged. We decided instead what we needed to do was to fix our use of deadly force law, which is the most egregious in the United States of America. If the young man, Mr. Terrence in Tulsa, if that scene had gone down here in the state of Washington, the police officer would not have been charged. We have a requirement that malice must need to be shown in a police shooting. Bad faith is unique. They have to demonstrate that the killing was executed in bad faith. Also, it pretty much is what some call a license to kill. And so the work that we here in our community is around is getting this law changed and such that police officers who unjustifiably kill people are able to be criminally charged. And right now we're in the middle of a joint legislative task force with 26 members from the legislature in the state, from law enforcement and the community, working out and figuring out what kind of best practices do we need to reduce these violent interactions and lethal interactions between law enforcement and the community. So we're talking about and looking at how do we need to change this law and to hold our police officers accountable, that then could build some public trust and as well as protect the safety and the lives of the police.
Interesting. Excellent. So just to kind of just start, like I said, starting with a framing conversation, and I'll kind of start off with Michael, since you do have, knowledge, professional knowledge, and like you said, academic expertise as well. Just thinking about like how, from either your experience or research, how these types of incidences are even handled, right? Because we know that, officers are often in situations where they have to react on the spot to whatever set of stimuli or anything that's going on. But like, what are some of the issues, I think, to just break it down a little bit on a simple level, what are some of the issues that, exist in terms of the way maybe their officers are instructed in terms of what force to use and how it actually plays out in the field itself?
Yeah, so we're gonna kind of like take a far left turn on this, maybe that you weren't anticipating. It's that all of these things that we talk about for human interaction. So human interactions run the gamut. Anybody can respond in any way. That's not really our problem. Our problem is the system that's in place that surrounds this decision-making process. And in this system, American policing is a very unique beast. It comes from 3 different things, and that is the recapturing and apprehension of slaves, from the protection of white property, and from the continued genocide of the Aboriginal people, the Native Americans here in this country. So you can turn on TV now and you can watch the CVS of Baltimore be looped over and over, and that's the protection of white property. We yell at protesters as a society saying, what are you doing? You're doing this, you're doing that. And that's people freaking out over white property being destroyed, and not like at the care and concern of in Baltimore, where it was Freddie Gray, who was the only person that was ever killed in the entire incident. So that's the recapturing and putting slaves back into the new Jim Crow. And we can watch in North Dakota as policing continues the genocide of the Native American people. So as long as we operate in that paradigm, I don't see solutions as being actually viable.
Interesting. Dr. Johnson, if you want to.
Oh, Michael, I love you in the most professional way. I am blowing you a kiss right now. So I suspect that you have just set me up to begin with the Emancipation Proclamation specifically, and I quote, "And as a fit and necessary military measure for effecting this object, I, as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, do order and declare that on the first day of January in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or states wherein the constitutional authority of the United States shall not then be practically recognized, submitted to, and maintained, shall be then, thenceforward, and forever be free." And I would submit that what we are really looking at are the final vestiges of racism, which really is a smoke and mirror for greed, power, and control. Because Black people were brought here from Africa to be enslaved so that they could be free labor, so white people could become rich, harvesting tobacco. And we're the only people that, based on skilled color, that equates to slavery, inferior, and other narrative that obviously is inappropriate and unacceptable, because we are not only still here, we are still thriving. Furthermore, as Grandma Alice would say, you don't mess with junk. But nevertheless, what I'm looking at, and Michael will hit it dead on in terms of the systemic racism. But see, we've been conditioned that Black people are dangerous, lazy, not to be trusted. The police indeed were empowered to kill, destroy, maim, and otherwise decimate Black people in general, Black men in particular. That is why they were hung, lynched, and beaten, particularly in front of other Black young men, so that they would be taught how to behave, and in front of Black women, so that they would teach their sons to be docile. And when we think about, in not too terribly long ago, the Klan were indeed law enforcers and were again given the opportunity and expected indeed to keep Black people under control. And so therefore, I sat in on the Washington State Patrol simulator to see how police were trained to interact with individuals in determining to kill or not kill, shoot or not shoot, or use some non-lethal force. And I wasn't doing that because I already know that these are split-second decisions. I did it to see if that same tool can be used to recondition our law enforcement officers and possibly even society. Because if any of us take the Harvard Project Implicit test and we're flashed images and have to make split-second decisions on whether or not we feel safe or unsafe, people, be they Black, white, Asian, Native Americans, whatever, typically indicate that they feel safer with white people than Black people. And that is due to conditioning, brainwashing. You see, that is why from the helicopter in Tulsa, we heard the officer say, "Oh, that looks like a big bad dude." How do we even know that? See, that comes from what he is storing in his subconscious. So I really see that we are living at a time where we have an opportunity to once and for all own our bias, deal with our bias, and learn how to replace that hate with love. Dr. King was right. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Otherwise, we're on a course to destroy ourselves, because you see, we are at the place now where people who feel as though justice is askew as it relates to them are now taking justice into their own hand. Case in point, the young man who killed those police in Dallas. We in our community after that then had skinheads come forth and decide that they were going to stab a Black man and his white girlfriend to protect the police. And so we have all this hatred now that's being released and embedded in our systems of operations here in this society. And once again, I think it is time for us to decide that we're either going to come together as human and live together in a beloved community, or we're going to destroy ourselves based on something so irrelevant as skin color, over which, by the way, no one had an opportunity to decide. No one had the opportunity to decide which earth suit they were going to walk out this journey called life in. And so I see this as an opportunity for us to rise up and deal with what we're storing in our beliefs, our values, our principles, and get past the greed, power, and control. This is an elitist system and structure in place to maintain the establishment, to maintain control. Because I'm almost through. Because you
You're
see,
fine. You guys are giving me life tonight.
Where I am, I brought up Abraham Lincoln. So after he was killed, after the Emancipation Proclamation, we then go into Reconstruction, and that is the only time in American history where Black people and poor white people came together and ruled the land until white people were sold Jim Crow. And even though it didn't put any food in their belly or any clothes on their backs, they thought that they were better than Black people because they were white. And that's when all of us were booted out of office by the elitists. And there we are today. I will rest my peace right there.
Okay, great. Because you guys actually brought up too, and Michael, when you said you're going to make this conversation go left, but that's beautiful because I love actually the direction this is going in anyway. You know, when we're brainstorming kind of how to structure this is awesome though. We're gonna roll with the way you guys set this up. So I'm gonna go back to the point that Michael made about basically with the way the current system itself, not so much how human interaction occurs, but with the way the system is set up, that strategies and changes won't really make much of a difference. And then what Dr. Johnson has just said about also talking about implicit biases and the way we've basically been conditioned over the generations to react this way. So like bringing those two ideas together into this conversation, like, so then how do we really actually move forward? Because otherwise we're just going to keep spinning our wheels having the same conversation over again about these issues. And I love the historical references and context because that really does start putting it all into perspective. Like I read a piece from James Baldwin from The Nation from July, I think it was July 11th, 1966. And there's a part in there when he's talking about, you know, just the way the treatment by police officers and basically, you know, summer 66, you know, urban uprisings, that type of stuff going on. And like, it rings so true. And he could be writing about today. So we are seeing a cycle, this cycle where it continues. So how do we begin to move? What do we look for? Like, how do we move past, you know, this cycle to something better or different or what is, and then I guess we should talk about what that actually even looks like. Because we say we want to change things. I know people say, you know, we need to get rid of the police or we need to change the system or do this. But one, how do we change things? And then two, what would that look like? So let's, I guess, talk about how do we even address those two issues, implicit bias and a system that some will say it wasn't broken. It's doing what it was meant to do, like you both have discussed.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what we're really talking about there is the short-term goals, because what the doctor was talking about and growing up in rural white America, we have a society that did view policing and still continue to view like what I did as being a zookeeper, as like keeping the monkeys in the zoo down in Baltimore. The concept in society is to trap them in there, not to like take care of them and be good in the city. So you're asking, how do we operate and do harm reduction in that current environment while fixing the long-term environment? So short-term, we have to look at things like the implicit bias, but we have to be super careful to let the right people and to really thoroughly analyze this, because we end up in mistakes that were well-intentioned. The crack law disparity is a good example of one of those laws that had good intentions that went wrong. And implicit bias training is one too, where we explain to people and we go to these shootings and we try to teach them, like, look, this black male is empirically not as dangerous or any more of a threat than any other person. So what we took away from that, a lot of police agencies, there's even a Baltimore Sun article quoting specific Baltimore police officers, is that they walk away thinking, oh, I should be just as afraid of the white person as I am afraid of the black guy. And it's like, no, the exact opposite is what we were trying to achieve there. So we have to be extremely careful about what we are doing. So for short-term goals, you're talking harm reduction. So you're talking, and in the drug war, you're talking about doing proper implicit bias training, which to me is about integration and not occupation. It's just more about getting into the community and actually knowing the community. You can change the metrics and you can change some of the incentives from a management perspective, but you're still trying to operate in that system that essentially is in a poisonous soil. And while the tree is a criminal justice system, we can pick off a leaf and say, oh, this is poisonous, and throw it away and put some medicine on it. But that same poisonous soil is going to crawl right back into whatever reform measures we did. If we don't do the most important thing that we need to do right now, is to not allow policing to continue to be something that the oligarchy tells the people they will do, and then they will told what kind of policing they will get. That is fundamentally illogical. The people getting the service must be the ones that are guiding and directing. So it's not about civilian accountability, it's about civilian direction. You must have a board of people in charge of the police department that is not the mayor, that is not the city council, that has goals beyond 4-year goals. A good example of this real fast is that a mayor and politicians are going to seek 4-year goals from their enforcement wing, but the best and most positive correlation that we have to an actual violent crime causation is lead poisoning. Lead poisoning has a 20-year payoff for its abatement, so no politicians are going to truly attack the most problematic thing that we have that damages hyper-segregated neighborhoods, and environmental poisoning is almost entirely clustered in hyper-segregated Black neighborhoods. So why do Black males have a higher propensity for violence possibly? I don't know. Maybe because you're intentionally poisoning them with lead poisoning every single year. Or why is there not fathers in the house, which is actually quite untrue, but for the reasons that they are, I mean, maybe it's because you employ people like me to expertly take them off the street and put them in prison cells for nonviolent offenses and things where there's not an actual harm to society, which breaks down the entire fabric of police legitimacy and procedural justice, which is what you see coming to fruition. Sure.
So where I mean, that's absolutely like wow. And I think I was reading, I think it was an article. When I was going through your website earlier, I think it was, you were talking about how there were times where you'd have to fill your quota and you'd even go like to someone else's area to make sure you could still get your numbers. It's so wild because like for so many of us, we have productivity quotas like in our day-to-day job, right? Especially if you're a paper pusher, you got to meet a certain benchmark, whatever. But I don't think people think about policing. People think about, okay, you're just supposed to be keeping the community safe. But when you're looking, I mean, is that the situation that some officers then find themselves in? Because then they have this quota or they have this benchmark or they have this other external pressure that has nothing really to do actually with community safety. That's some number that someone someplace decided upon. Does that then also like frustrate any of these efforts that we're talking about now that need to be addressed, whether it's looking at how you said integrate instead of, occupying areas? Like, does that also then factor in or frustrate?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. So you have politicians and police chiefs telling you one thing. So they'll take a photo op with a Black kid at a playground being like, look how well we service our community. But at the same time, they're evaluating all their officers by how many of those Black males they take off the streets through a minor drug arrest. So we have to not look at their words and look at their actions. I'm not aware of a single agency in this entire country that has any metrics or incentives for their officers that are actually deemed by the people that the people want. We use things like broken windows and stop and frisk and CompStat and evidence-based policing, which you're going to hear a lot about now. But remember, the evidence is essentially a self-reported survey of the oppressors. You cannot rely on that data. It's junk.
Absolutely. Dr. Johnson, just to kind of go back a little bit to then, to piggyback on what Michael's been talking about, to kind of, go to what you were saying about like looking at the way in which politics and racism have affected our ability to not just help inform these processes that are going on, but also just how we've been, basically how historically we have been removed from any decision-making ability and engagement in the system. I mean, so many people are like, well, why don't Black people go vote in their communities or do this and that? But like you were saying, there's a history that has kept us, and not just in the Jim Crow South, across the North and other places that have marginalized our ability to actually have input in some of these discussions. So then, we have some of the issues that Michael was just talking about, but then we also have this from the community aspect, being able to even have the voice, being able to even feel like sitting down with the Olympia Police or whatever other organization would even make a difference. How do we then, help not just train people, but engage people to see the need for that type of engagement and action?
Well, I believe that case is being made for us from the national political candidates and the shootings that have taken place across this nation. So it is pretty clear, I believe, that anyone who wants to be honest can see that this is an opportunity for everyone to engage. And I want to, before I get to that question though, no, I want to just say a couple things about what Michael had said.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
And I'm going to start with the monkeys in the zoo. See, it's that kind of, let me back up. The way we used to train individuals to go to war was to dehumanize the enemy so that they had no problem killing Japanese baby children, etc. So to dehumanize us and equate us with animals or whatever, that is part of that strategy. That kind of strategy needs to be, I think, dealt with. Also, what is it going to take? I think Michael was spot on when he talked about the oppressor and the oppression of the oppressor. And I think it's time now for people of color, particularly Black people, to realize that we are not the victims here. We're the victors. We, in the face of all of this, have been here for 400 years, and it's now time to come out of the wilderness. So I'm going to act as the modern day Moses and say, let my people go. And I believe that's how we get people engaged, by modern day leaders standing up and indicating we will not have this is unacceptable. And so this is because this is going to require what I was really hearing Michael talk about is what I call a complete cultural change. He talked about, you could do whatever, we can have policies and trainings and this and the other, but until we do this soil, the culture that allows, that contains the values and the beliefs and the expectations of what gets rewarded and what is recognized and what is expected, until we change that police culture, nothing is going to change. So I'm calling for a complete systemic redesign. Matter of fact, I almost believe that it's probably to be blown up and redesigned in a way that includes the voices of the citizens. Otherwise, as Einstein says, if we keep doing the same thing and expect a different outcome, that's called insanity. Dr. Deming put it this way: your system is designed to give you the results that you're getting. So until we make systemic changes, we're going to continue to get what we're getting. And so what we're calling for is, first and foremost, across the nation, that we begin to rewrite use of deadly force laws across the land. Amnesty International looked at all of the use of deadly force laws in this nation, and none are examples from which we can model. So we here in the state of Washington are seeking to use some of this best practice language that Michael had talked about, that came from the President's Task Force of the 21st Century, from the Police Executive Research Forum, that basically fundamentally puts at the center of the law the sanctity of life. This is not a civil rights issue. This is a human rights issue. Yes, and making it very clear that when people are unjustifiably killed, that police officers will have an opportunity to be criminally charged. That just need to be right there across the board, because without any type of consequence for their behavior, wherein is the opportunity to change the behavior. The next thing I believe needs to happen is anyone who wants to be a police officer, particularly if they're white, wanting to be policing people who are non-white, then their orientation and hiring condition needs to be that they have successfully spent 6 months unpaid in the community where they'll be working, so they could get to relate and get to know the people. Furthermore, like doctors and judges, police officers are the only other group who get to sit in judgment of themselves. And so when these internal reviews are going on, it's not that citizens really know that process, but certainly citizens know when something is amiss and askew. And I do believe that we need more open and honest or transparency in the review process. So basically, the law, I think, serves as the foundation upon which, or the umbrella under which, training, policies, practices, procedures are all aligned. And until we say enough is enough, where it is necessary for a police officer to use lethal force because the person is a danger to themselves or other selves, we make that clear, because we don't want police officers being unnecessarily killed either. But we want to begin to build public trust, public safety, and public accountability. And we need to say, now is the time to people to get involved. This is time to be voting. This is time to go to city council. This is time to stand up, be counted, and be heard to say, yes, it may be true, all lives do matter, but right now, Black lives matter. Because if we were the fire department and a house is on fire, that's like the fire people saying, oh yeah, all houses matter. Well, we know that's right. However, the one that's on fire is the one that is a fire truck. And so here we are, we just need to deal with this, what many call the original sin of racism that's in our heart, and begin to start hiring properly. Because quite truthfully, if you think about the training that's going to be required for implicit explicit bias, it'd just be easier to just go ahead and get individuals from these street organizations who already know how to protect their property and their territory, and just go ahead and train them to be police officers instead of putting them in jail. Now that would be criminal justice. I would think that would be justice. Let's just go ahead and use these groups we already have in place. Some refer to them as gangs, some refer to them as street organizations, some refer to them as surrogate families, but whatever they are, there's largely are young men of color who are trying to make a living in America where there's oppression, income inequity, and they have a sense of belonging. So let's just go ahead and incentivize them to be entrepreneurs, because when you're running a drug ring, you've got marketing going on, you've got some distribution going on, you've got recruitment, you've got a reward. So let's just go ahead and use all those skills that are necessary to be a successful entrepreneur, and let's just flip that. Let's just go ahead and do, if we really want to be serious about this. So let's just call the question. Let's not let Dr. King and those who've gone before him die in vain, and put together a system that leads to a place where there's a sanctity of all human life. And I will also concede that we need to cut the police, law enforcement, some slack here, because they're not the only ones in society who are operating like this. This is institutional structural racism across the land, such that we now have a school to prison pipeline that pretty much is making Black people totally invisible in the whole land. And what I don't understand, that people don't understand, is once they figure out how to make this work for us, they then try to expand to others, because the smoke and mirror is that this is about color. The reality is this is about greed, power, and control. That's what this is really about. Stand up, show up, and be counted, and speak up. And let's get busy to change the culture, the laws, the training, and the policies and procedures in our law enforcement offices.
Like, listening to the two of you talk, and one, it reinforces things that I myself have already, kind of thought from beginning to look into this. But two, it really helps put another framing dynamic on, how do we begin to engage? Like, what are the issues specifically we need to look at, besides, moving from hashtag or name to name of being upset? And not that that's wrong, but how do we really dig in and do the work so that our kids or grandkids in 30, 40, 50 years are not also doing the same thing, having the same exact conversation? But listening to you all, like, start to break it down on what organizing would look like, what strategies and methods would be needed to really actually bring about community change. We've been hearing a lot from different folks particularly in response to, you know, Colin Kaepernick's protest, that, oh, people just need to start respecting police officers. I really have, or because of, you know, the protests involving, you know, the flag, we need to respect military families but I think something you just said, Karen, was so true, that this is a human rights issue, right? And we shouldn't be comparing one group of loss of life to another. Like, loss of life is a problem across the board. And in this instance, we have people who are saying, well, you're offending us with the way you're objecting to this, you know, objectification of human bodies. And because our feelings are hurt, you shouldn't do it like this. But is this an issue that we should be focusing on the respect or how we're doing it? Or do we need to take time out then to explain to people that we're not being disrespectful? We're not, I mean, like, do you even need to do that? Because I see you, either one of you can jump in with this, because I see some people saying, well, if people would just respect the police, or if you would just respect this, or if people would just be respectful. I mean, how many times, you know, people will just comply. Like, it is something so deep and cultural that people seem to see that.
It's false, though. It's false. It's simply false. People do comply, and they still end up dead. The article I wrote in the Guardian was just from when that happened to Philando Castile. It's not comply or die. It's comply and still die. So, what it does is it blames the oppressed. So I say I'm not interested in criticizing how the oppressed respond to their oppression, but it's always that it's fundamentally the state and the police job to come to the community. Even the concept that there is a midway point is fundamentally, philosophically, ideologically, completely flawed. The police are the ones in service, not the community to the police. I don't accept it at all that the community has any bearing to budge towards the police. The police have every bit of responsibility to go to the people.
So, I just so enjoy you two. I could hang out with you all almost every day. You've made my day.
We can definitely do this again.
In my day job, I'm employed to lead an organizational change, and then we call it respect. And it's creating a work environment where everyone feels included, valued, and heard. And at the core of this is, in order to change our habit of behaving, doing something different, we have to change our habit of speaking and our habit of thinking, which takes us right back to the 98 to 96% of our behaviors and actions that are controlled by our subconscious, what we call implicit bias. And so it's going to take both. It's going to take listening. It's going to take talking, and it's going to take action. But it's also going to take, I think, let me say it this way. Let me back up. I was sitting on a panel for our state here, and the question was, how do we achieve equity in state government? And my response was, well, maybe I'm too old or maybe I'm too tired. But right now, my answer to that is, if you have to ask that question here in 2016, maybe you have the wrong people in the seat. So why don't you just go ahead and fire them and hire those of us who know what to do? And it does come down to respect, which is, according to Aretha Franklin, RESPECT, find out what that means to me. And not tell me what that means to me or project onto me what that means to me. And it's about really embracing our difference. People use, I guess, diversity is not the code word for whatever, black, I don't know, just call it what it is. But when I hear the word diversity, that means however many people there are in the world, that's called diversity, because each of us has an individual thumbprint or fingerprint. And it's time now to do things differently, because if not, what's going to happen again is more Black people are going to take justice in their own hands, as Michael was alluding to. And my concern is that every Black person in America is going to say, you know what, the NRA is absolutely right. Let me go ahead and get my little gun and exercise my Second Amendment right because I'm in fear of my life. Or we will have the police to say, well, you know what, we're sick of all y'all, so we're just going to go ahead and walk out. So y'all go ahead and patrol yourselves. And then the concern here in our state is that, we definitely don't want police officers of who are Black or brown, to say, you know what, but we're not going to get charged, so we just go ahead and make this right. We just go ahead and kill all these white people. So see, none of this is constructive, and it's time to be constructive, listen, talk, hear, and be part of the change we want to see. Maybe perhaps instead of incarcerating these young men, maybe they need to do some community service with law enforcement. I don't know. But we have to do something different, and it starts with dialogue, and it also starts with standing up and saying enough is enough. And who was it? South Carolina or Charlotte, they decided, you know what, we go to go back to old school. We go just boycott. If maybe Black lives don't matter, well, does our green money matter? You know, because it's about greed, power, and control. So it's time now for all people of goodwill to come together, maybe lock arms and sing "We Shall Overcome." They seem to like that as we begin to figure out what are we going to do so that we can live together in this beloved society where we respect each other for who we are and not allow anybody to kill us and deem us less worthy as a human being because of the color of skin. We will not stand for that. And so it's time to stand up against that and for the sanctity of all life. And be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
So I was gonna follow up just real quickly what you were talking about in terms of use of force legislation, and then kind of just trying to tie back into what Mike was talking about earlier, or maybe it's taking us even farther left. I'm not sure, but one of the things that I've thought about, I'm an attorney by my day job, by my day trade, and one thing that just absolutely agonizes me is with these prosecutors and like, oh, there's no reason, there's no way, and I just sit there like, my mom did criminal defense work, civil rights law, and she runs a social justice clinic at her law school now. And so we go back and forth all the time. And so the thing she always says to me is that there are laws in many places already on the books. It's not, I understand what you're saying about the use of force laws where, you know, in different places, and that is a specific example. But in a lot of cases, there are actually laws on the books where, you know, prosecutors can, pursue some type of charge, or there are administrative procedures that could be used by police departments, like in New York City after the killing of Anthony Baez with the chokehold rule, right? It didn't necessarily get enforced properly in Eric Garner's case, but that rule did get put on the books in New York City after, you know, the Baez case. So I was just curious, Michael or Dr. Johnson, just either one of you, I'm just curious, like, what about the role of prosecutors in this whole process? I mean, we talk about the way or not just prosecutors, but I guess the justice system, like that side of the justice system, right? The legal system and the courts. Like, what do you see from your experience of how they play into, you know, enabling the system with cops that allows for this to continue to go? We see cops in some of these cases, they've had multiple shootings on their jackets, or there are other issues. They may not be shootings, but there's multiple other charges or harassment or assaults or whatever the case may be, but there's no repercussions taken. There are no charges brought or filed. Like, how does that factor into all of this and our interaction with prosecutors? We've seen some prosecutors.
Slow down, give me one question at a time.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. Like, I just started getting excited. I'm so sorry I got excited. So you can take whatever part of that. You can just pick whatever little part you like. I'm sorry. I just got so excited. I'm like, and then wait a minute, there's just this part too. Right. It starts to snowball, but go ahead.
You're trying to operate in a broken system. This is what I keep trying to avoid everybody to get away from. I even find it inconsistent with what should be our fundamental philosophies. So for one, convicting and laws doesn't stop any crime. We shouldn't ever think it would stop police crime. So if we want to fundamentally re-envision what criminal justice is and have it more towards a system of rehabilitation than of retribution, then why would we want to have retribution on officers if our criminal, like, we're supposed to put people in prison so that it protects the rest of society, not to punish that individual person. So with cops, we do get into a weird paradox where they're operating as state-sanctioned agents. So if we think that we're going to convict them and that will stop other people from doing it, all the evidence says that we're wrong. And we're in a weird situation that if we were to just fire them, they are not in that situation again. And you've almost effectively rehabilitated the propensity to do a crime as a state-sanctioned agent because you entirely removed its possibility. So we have to really think about whether we want to be a retribution and how that is, like, we have to have that compassion for the people that we're also seeing as the enemy at the time. The other thing I want to add into that is, so while we need to be aware of all that, we get caught up in things that thinking that, for instance, Black cops will make a difference. This is empirically false. NWA rapped about this a long time ago, and Black cops are just as much a victim of the culture and the oppression that implicit bias puts on us. Just because you're Black, you are not immune from the implicit bias of society. David Clark from Milwaukee
Wisconsin,
is
yes,
a shining example of that ability to be brainwashed into the culture as well. So I am very less concerned about the way people think. I am concerned about the way they behave. So I ultimately focus on metrics and incentives that will encourage people to do the right thing, and disincentives that would encourage them to not even want to be here. Like, if you work for my agency, we were pretty much going to scream Black Lives Matter. So if you're a cop that doesn't buy that image, you're not going to want to be in my agency. So, there's other ways of weeding out people other than being aggressive ourselves.
No, your point is well taken, and I think we for the most part agree, Michael, that definitely agree that there's a culture shift that is necessary as defined by having clear expectations of values and accountability that reinforces the behavior that we expect to see. Change our habit of thinking, change our habit of doing. I get that. And I also understand that Black cops also bleed blue. I understand that as well. However, even though they may bleed blue, they also though know how to deal with the people who they're dealing with, and know that sometimes they can have a conversation if they roll up on some young man, and instead of just going to automatically shoot him, have a dialogue or conversation with him, or a different type of interaction. So there's some sort of connectedness and familiarity with the culture of the person that they're dealing with that a white person does not have. And what should we do? I'm reminded of Frederick Douglass. It's amazing how all these individuals are just so relevant right now. I love
the historical
and he says, if
context.
there is no struggle, there is no progress. And then he goes on to talk about power concedes nothing without a demand. Now and so my narrative is that institutional structural racism is just a smoke and mirror for greed, power, and control. So it seems to me that one of the strategies, therefore, is if power concedes nothing without a demand, it is time for us to make demands for change that value the sanctity of life. And I really like what you said, what Michael said about having those clear expectations of how people are going to treat people. Right now in law enforcement, they have a concept about police officers being either warriors or guardians. And maybe Black people, maybe they need to learn how to extend some of that guardianship to Black and brown people as opposed to that warriorship. And we haven't really talked about demilitarizing the police. I just want to touch on that momentarily.
Go ahead, because I actually got a question from the chat about that I was just looking at. Go ahead.
And notwithstanding, this is where most of the Black police officers come from MPs, but nevertheless, they're trained to shoot and kill. And what we're talking about in community policing is a whole different mindset. And so this is going to require a variety of strategies. There is no panacea. There is no one fix. It's not just the law. It's not just training. It's not one thing. It's going to be several things coming together.
Okay, let me see. Let me get this question, because this question kind of ties into the issue of where is it? Hold on for 1 second. I just got sent questions because there are a couple of questions from the chat. People had some questions, and basically it was about, basically the question is from one of our internal members of Progressive Armies. What do you think about the effects of a perpetual inborn criminal population? In other words, Black people has on the militarization of the police force. So having, this population, like what do you think that has affect any on militarization of police? And if there are any internal justifications for armored personnel carriers in urban centers?
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. So
I'm reading like, I think I get this right. I think I understand what they're meaning, but apologies, Brandon, if I botched your question.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the initial part either with the perpetual system, but our current model of policing focuses on the symptoms of crime. So if you think of crime like viruses, then what we're only focused on is whether we suppress the cause. So the only answer that policing have for suppression is violence. So everything is violence towards the suppression of a system. The thing is our actions that suppress the symptoms. So if it's a cough, then those actions that we have, the medicine we take, are actually feeding the virus that's causing the cough. So when we take somebody off of the streets because they've committed a crime, usually the reason they've committed that crime is because of some kind of economic desperation where they're reaching for something. And what we end up doing is we end up putting more hurdles in their way by putting them into the system. So you put somebody back on the street that's more likely to commit an offense, and then they weren't there for their family. So gains in reduction of violent crime, from all of my estimations, have occurred not because of policing, but in spite of policing. When you come to militarization, you're doing the same thing. So the only response is force. So it keeps growing and growing in a very Orwellian type of model where the end result is ultimate occupation and soldiers marching down the street. You're watching that evolution take place in front of your face. On my Chicago essays that are on my website, you can see where I talk a little bit more about the militarization and its specificity for urban zones. So does a city like Chicago need a highly militarized SWAT team in a country that's infested and saturated with weapons and has no idea what they're doing and the dangers they have by having weapons everywhere in this country? Yeah, you need that. But the thing is it's only like you could have a very good unit in Chicago, but that means everybody for 50 miles doesn't need such a unit. It's Chicago. It's Chicago. And I'll leave it at that because I think militarization is just, it's preposterous. I mean, the idea that we have military vehicles on our streets, I mean, and it's almost like boys with toys. You give them toys and they're going to play with them, and we watch it happen. They have a drug war, and then you militarize. So you have tanks going down the streets, doing raids on people's houses where there's children, and they're going after a substance that's the only thing we've ever known to not kill anyone ever. So that's another example of how we can't operate in this structure because we have to focus on the causes of crime in a model that perpetually feeds itself with the goal of abolition, not the goal of a total Orwellian occupation. That's it.
I think we actually have a call. Someone wanted, no, that was a great point, but I think I just got a message that we actually have someone who wanted to call in and ask you guys a question. So I said, okay, we can do that. So she's not on the line yet. But if she calls back, then caller, you can call back if you'd like to ask your question. But I just wanted to, because I know Karen, that you might have to go soon.
Yes.
So I just wanted to circle back to maybe some of some of the work that you guys have coming up. It's a little bit about, we jumped right into the conversation. I didn't even really get to ask you too much about the Black Alliance for Thurston County and specifically some of the things that you guys are working on. Because I want to give you just a chance to just talk a little bit about the work that you've been doing there in Olympia and Thurston County, and anything else you would like to add before you have to leave us.
Okay, well, thank you.
But I definitely want you to come back.
I definitely want to come back, and I just so enjoy Michael Wood Jr. here, and I must just say, when he was talking about the boys the toys, I just want to put out there that at some point, I just want everybody to remember that in Dallas, it was a robot that killed.
Yes.
That was a robot that took out that young man. So I just want to put that out there. I don't want to really go into that right now. And in terms of just the work that we're doing, again, we came together to deal with these shootings, to change our law because our law on use of deadly force is the most egregious in the state. In the nation, excuse me. We pretty much give our officers a license to kill. But more importantly, as well as we want to deal with some more transparency in the internal review of deadly force shootings in our city, our county, as well as call for independent prosecutions of these kinds of killings. That's that work. But fundamentally, in dealing with, in talking with the founders, we are really about the reparation of the Black life and psyche and self-esteem. We understand that education is key to thriving in this nation, and we spend time now, we're spending time with young people in having a tough time being included, valued, and heard in schools. We also are looking at the economic and social and political justice of Black people and are working to increase diversity in our legislature. So basically, we're on a whole We Be Free campaign. Give us free, we be free, and we're here to exercise our freedom because we do not succumb to the victim mentality. We do not believe that we are inferior. In fact, we believe that Black and brown people are the majority, not the minority. So we're not really feeding into any of that narrative, and really are standing up and doing what we can to be leaders and helping and guiding and nurturing and mentoring and rolling up our sleeves and going to the school boards, going to the schools, going where the people are to make a difference. And we're blessed here in Thurston County because we have incredible allies. I received so many emails from people who describe themselves as I'm a 64-year-old white man hippie, social justice advocate. I'm glad that you're here because they've been dealing with the whole issue around, they really refer to as police brutality. They've been dealing with this for quite a while and felt disingenuous in leading the charge without Black people. And so we are really, really blessed that we have many, many partners with us around changing the state law, getting the police department and training that lead around implicit, explicit bias, helping them to shift their culture to, like Michael was talking about. So now the expectations are clear on what the behavior will be, what the consequences are for that behavior and the rewards, just shifting the soil, that whole culture of the police department, and really beginning to have conversations around institutional structural racism, reading the new Jim Crow. I mean, people just increasing awareness because we cannot deal with that which we cannot talk about. We cannot be healed of that for which we're not going to confess. And it's really time for us to forgive one another, for Black people to forgive white people and their foremothers and forefathers, for white people to get over this guilt or denial, whatever, and just own their stuff. And for us to come together as a human race. As a matter of fact, I've now taken, when asked the question, what is my race? I now write human. I'm like, let me just start my own little hashtag
you
human.
Your own box.
Hashtag human. Black, Asian, Pacific Islander. That's not a race. We're human race. So let's start acting like it because we're concerned. The Black Alliance of Thurston County and those who partner with us, we're concerned that we have lost touch with the value of community. We have lost touch with each other. We're approaching a day where the bears and the fish and the cats and the dogs take better care of each other than we as human beings take care of ourselves. And so we're here to be a positive light, here for liberty and justice for all. And we are here to create what Dr. King referred to as that beloved community, where we are standing up now because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we believe that, and we do believe, and because we, like Michael was talking about the oppressed, we have had plenty of time to study how the oppressor operates. And so now it's time to say, you know what, enough is enough. Let's just go ahead and just flip the script here. This is a new day. We are here to participate. We are just as valuable as you. So own your stuff, get over it because it's on. And we are here to demand our liberty and justice for all and life with abundance, liberty without oppression, and the pursuit of happiness. We're here for all of that.
I love it. I think we have a caller on the line with a question. Caller, if you're on the line, just your name quickly, where you're from, and keep it kind of brief. But what's your question?
This is
So we can
Umar
get you
from
in
Brooklyn.
there. Hey, Umar. I
Can you hear me?
hear him.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make a suggestion really quick. I think also that we need to send a message that we got to stop using the phone and the videos, all of them, Periscope, Facebook messaging, as an afterthought, and make it everyone had their phones prepared. Because even though it seems like now the video from the 60s that was showing the protests had no effect, it did, in fact, have an effect, because I remember my parents used to be out on those protests. We had signs and placards everywhere. And I remember as a kid, I used to be worried looking at the queue, wondering, is mom and dad in that? Because they was always out at these things. But this has power, and it also documents things. And while it doesn't seem to have an immediate effect, it does work. So I think that should be like a part of the lexicon. Have your phones, have your video apps, have it ready for any type of encounters and document it. I want to just throw that out there.
Thank you, Umar. Appreciate you calling in. If you guys, I know there's a couple of you who've been trying to call in. If you want to call in, you want to kind of get a quick question in, because I know.
Yes.
Caller?
Yes, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. My bad. This is Vita from San Leandro.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, how are you doing? My question is to both of the panelists there is, we talk about having these conversations over and over until the oppressor takes a stand and start working towards affecting how people think about the Black culture, Black people, period. They must start with the education and within the school system by changing the books that the kids are using inside the school, the textbooks. The textbooks are wrong, and it does not give them the true history of the United States of America and the Black community, the Black people. So until you start there, there's nothing going to change, because they have a belief system that we are not human. And I don't think that we can't change each other's belief system, how they feel about a different person, but you can affect them with economics. And the police departments need to have some kind of mechanism where if they do something wrong, there's penalties. They have to be treated like the normal citizens if they make a mistake. Even in any job market that you're in, there's consequences within that corporation if you do something wrong that doesn't fit into that job description in which you applied for. They don't need any more training. They know what they're supposed to do. Our tax dollars, if they're not there, whoever's evaluating them in the human resource department, they need to check them, because we can't go around talking about bias as just another flipping over racism. They're racist. They're not biased. You're racist. If you're racist and you have the opportunity to control a person's livelihood, that is racism. You know, just speaking about saying something. A word or something, but if you have laws that are outcome is racism and discrimination, you cannot. You have to start there. We can't keep dancing around bias training and all the police need these training. They need body cams. They have body cams and they turn around and change the law, or they don't cut them on. And people's lives. People are being killed. Parents are losing their kids. You can't get them back. Human life, you can't get it back. So we have to stop all this dancing around the issue. You know, that's all I got to say. Because it just don't make no sense for us to keep dancing around all these alliances. White people know. You should know by now. We have educated people with BAs and masters, and they go for jobs, and their studies have been done already. There's so many studies has been done. Look at Dr. Khalil Muhammad's book about data, how data lies. Why do we have to keep having data when we know for 400 or 500 years what the hell's been going on?
Sorry, we gotta make sure we have other calls coming in, stuff like that, but definitely Berta, great points about in terms of changing culture, because I think it goes back to the early conversation we were having about how we have to change culture, because this is a cultural issue that has been ingrained in society since the inception of this country. Systemic racism is not something that just came to us via
Right.
Donald Trump in this recent
Right.
election cycle.
Right.
It is so. It's in the fabric, it's in the fibers, it's in the Constitution. I mean,
Right.
It's in the genesis, and I think the work that you both have been working on. I mean, Michael, I know that you get, whether you probably get the other side of it too, but I know you do get a lot of praise because there are so many people who have been in your position that would not go your route. To step aside and say, this is like what you started out by saying. Tamir Rice still sticks with me. Freddie Gray still sticks with me. There are so many people who don't see it as a human life issue, a human rights issue, and just seeing like, well, that's them people, that's not our issue. And I think that when we start, ingraining in people that way of thinking, it helps us begin to really build on this work even more and move it to the next level. And we've been seeing that to some extent with, it's wild to see Black Lives Matter protests and you have a large white contingent. Like once upon a time, you might not have seen that. And now we are starting to see that. And people are making it their issue, even if it doesn't directly affect them. Or at least they don't think it affects them, but it clearly affects all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think those were all good points. But one thing I would like to say about what the caller was saying is to put it in the books and things like that. We're in the middle of a cultural shift that I think a good bit of older people don't recognize. So we have the age of technology, people that grew up in the age of technology, and we have the people that did not grow up in the age of technology. So those of us that grew up in the age of technology, the millennials and a little bit younger, you'll see that the numbers for bias, for racism, for conservative ideas, for believing in capitalism, these things are dramatically falling off. I mean, it's something. The last survey was something like 60% of people under 30 identify as being socialist. I mean, that was a dirty word not too long ago.
Right.
So the youth is dramatically different. We don't need a lot of tools. We have the greatest invention that's ever been put forth, and that's the internet in our hands, which is what allows these videos to be distributed, which allows us to have this conversation. I really think we're in a big period where we're stuck in an age of denial. So you have, like, right before the age of technology, that we're stuck in the age of denial, where all the people that have the technology and have the research are like, no, this is the truth. And then there's the whole anti-intellectual pre-age of technology, wanting to be controlled into the system, learning what to think and not how to think. So with the rest of us now, she should be rest assured that those 12-year-olds, if they hear some bull, they're going to go right to Google and be like, I told you slavery was in the Constitution. So, I mean, there is hope on that.
Yes, I know I'm back on. I apologize. I had to plug up. No, I wasn't plugged in. I just realized that I don't want my computer to die because that would be catastrophic for all of us. But one of the things that I think that like I said, like what you just said is absolutely right. I do know that there has been, like, as of, there is an issue with textbooks and the way kids are taught, but so there is so much learning that's happening, like you were saying, because of technology. It's happening outside of the traditional methodologies. Once upon a time, all we did have were textbooks, and then we do have an issue with, particularly when you're talking about the South, like, you're talking about, or the Southwest, talking about your Texas, you talk about Virginia. You do have this movement in more conservative areas to take textbooks to a completely different, this was all great and this all happened and everybody was happy. But at the same time, with the age of technology, like you were just saying, I mean, it's so easy to fact check that. I've actually been surprised raising kids, in public school. I've actually been surprised with the type of stuff my kids will actually bring home. Like, and we lived in West Virginia for several years, and my son was like, did you know Columbus was lost? And did you know he killed the Indians? And did you know this? And I looked at him and I was just like, because I was bracing myself, right? Because I grew up with politically conscious parents, and my parents would pull out the extra books and do this and do that. So I was bracing myself for having to to reteach my kid when he got home about the Mayflower, about all, and he was like, "Did you know my teacher told us this today?" And I was floored. This is a little off topic, but I think that there are things that are being done. It may not be like enough of it across the board, but there are examples where it's being done right. But there may be other issues, like when we talk about school discipline. I think Dr. Johnson, you referenced the school to prison pipeline earlier. The fact that now when you look at school handbooks across the country, the fact that what was once a fight between two 10-year-olds is now an assault or a battery. You have criminal language being used now in school handbooks and school methods. You have police officers handling what used to be ordinary disciplinary actions, like we saw in South Carolina with the young woman who refused to turn off her cell phone, who was hoisted and joisted around by the officer out of her seat. Like once upon a time, that was just resolved by the dean of students or whatever person you had in the, I remember I went to high school in Chicago. I remember having police officers on the premise and in the building, but they did not handle, unless something like really egregious happened, they did not interfere with the day-to-day stuff. We had a dean of students who handled that at our high school. So I do think that talking about culture in these ways, while we do have some advances, it is still the nuts and bolts and how some people get their initial information that's good. That kind of got me off track with what we were talking about before, but I know you're still hanging in there, Dr. Johnson. I know you had to go, but I'm so happy you're still here for a few more minutes. No, I know you're here for a few more minutes, and I definitely appreciate you so much for being here with us. But just thinking about kind of like, putting a cap on this conversation for a little bit, let's moving us to a little bit closing. Like, what is it though from your own work and your own experience that you all see that is pertinent for people to grasp as they move forward?
Couple things, and thank you for that question, Noah. The two things that I see as pertinent in the work that they were doing that I would like for people to grasp are, one, the absolute importance of listening to each other, mm-hmm. and going with that is calling racism out. And mm-hmm. we have to call it out now, and then listen, ask questions, and listen to each other, because we all come from our own different perspectives. The other thing that is pertinent, critical to the work that we're doing is what I would call being inclusive. Now, granted, you cannot be a founder of the Black Alliance unless you are Black. We're very clear about that. We're not trying to assimilate or collaborate or any of that. No, you could be, now if you're white, you could be an ally, you can work with us, but you're not running this. We are. And if you have a problem with coming in and walking inside or even following the lead of a Black person, then you can't hang with us. And we believe that this type of a construct is critical because white people have been conditioned that they cannot be led by a Black person. And what's beautiful about the work that we're doing, most of us are somewhat older. We are getting ready to get younger people because we need that intergenerational synergy. But it's about, we cannot change until we get rid of the white people to get over their guilt and their little fragility, and have to fix this and own this. And just like we don't have to teach Black police officers not to kill unnecessarily, unjustifiably kill white people, we might perhaps need to start, well, why is that? Well, maybe with that same conditioning, so we can help white people understand you can no longer unjustifiably kill Black people or people with disabilities or people with mental illness or any person. So those are the two takeaways: the listening. So we're having these conversation cafes around institutional and structural racism, and we're calling it that, where we're not trying to sugarcoat anything. These are courageous conversations for caring communities, because until and unless we're able to be honest and own ourselves and deal with it, we'll continue the cycle. And I believe that this is an opportunity. We are all brought here in this context called society for a time such as this to stand up and rise up and work together, replace the hate with love in our hearts, get rid of the hate, learn to relate, and instead of destroying one another, build one up. And I believe that's what Bernie Sanders was trying to say, calling out many of the injustices, when he was talking about, and we've all known that they've always had environmental injustices around Black people. That's what was about the railroads. Don't get me started. Please don't get me started because I need to go. So
Factories,
we all of that, so he was the first person I've heard who has called out these injustices such that when I heard him speak, I sat down and said, you know what, God, I knew I wasn't crazy. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for sending a white man to validate that I'm not crazy. Not that I needed him, but it certainly made my narrative a lot easier because now I could point to somebody who looked like them to say, see, were you able to hear that? You can't hear it from me because I'm invisible, but were you able to hear that? And so I believe that it's these kinds of conversations and these kinds of efforts that was really helping making us successful, being clear, focused, doing the hard work, changing the law, but also having the tough conversation and doing it all, Noah, in love. This not accusing, but listening and figuring out how we're going to do this better together because teamwork makes the dream work.
Definitely.
And also making it clear that we ain't going to let you kill us either anymore. Or kill our children, or treat us less than. Although it may have been, we were written in the 3/5 of the man in the Constitution, that was a lie then, and it's a lie now, because our Creator made us we were fearfully and wonderfully made, just like anybody else. And it's really time for Black people to also take off the effects of slavery for what I call this Lilliputian small thinking and understand that we're brilliant, we're geniuses, we're still here, and ought to be proud of the history that we walk through, because I believe that our work is making it better for those young people, like this young man sitting next to me handling this AV for me, Eric Miller, to be able to say, you know what, I can stand up and do what I can for my child. For the white woman who has this biracial child and don't know how to take care of their hair, we can be right there to help them. Come on, baby. No, you don't do that. You gotta go do this. We can become a community again and treat one another with love and respect. RESPECT. Find out what it means to me. Don't tell me. Don't project it. Find out what it means to me. I honor you, Noah. I honor you, Michael. Thank you.
I appreciate you so much for participating. Thank you. And shout out to Eric Miller, Progressive Army, Project Sanity's Own, for hanging in there, and one, for bringing us this jewel that is Dr. Karen Johnson, and then two, definitely for helping her with the tech and stuff on that side out there in Olympia is most appreciated. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us this evening.
Thank you. Blessings to you.
Michael, so I know you have been doing a variety of things. I've seen that, you might be in line to be Oakland's new police chief. But I don't know. But just some of the work that you've been, some of where your personal focus and interest. Can you talk just a little bit about some of the things that you've been personally focused and interested in with your work, and kind of what's next?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I feel like I have my hand in every cookie jar I possibly can, because I feel like I don't know which one will be the most effective. So I try to keep my hand in every single one, hoping whichever one ends up being most, I'm still involved, and then I can focus in on whatever that particular one is. So I'm kind of in a state of trying to do everything at once at the moment. One thing I did want to comment on is Dr. Johnson. She was saying about how, which I do say myself, that a white face validated the things that the Black community's been saying for forever, and somehow became irrelevant, and it really shouldn't have been. But we're all human, and I'm on the exact same opposite side of that, where I was reading the writings of D. Watkins from Baltimore, and he was telling the drug dealer side of the story. And when I was reading his words, I was saying the same thing. All right, I'm not crazy. I know what I'm talking about. D is exactly as I am on the other side of that window. We're not crazy. So, I mean, that kind of helped me say things as well when it came to that. But what I would like to leave people with is race is a matter of perception, not a matter of reality. It is a social construct that we have to recognize that there is nothing inherently. So even if we classify Black people being into something where there's a community or a category and whatever, That is merely that our perceptions that have categorized into that group. So if you have more blacks in prison, it's because we have perceived them as being something that they weren't and put them into that prison cell. So we have to fix our perceptions about what is wrong and what is going on in the world. And the way that I mainly go about doing that is to get people to look at civilian-led policing, the model that I've developed, which is exactly what Karen Johnson is saying is about our ESPCT, is that policing tells you what it will do, and it needs to ask you what it wants to do, what you want it to do. You pay for it. You deserve to guide its direction and demand what it is going to do. So that model's on Twitter. People can look it up.
Right.
And mainly what I end up doing is spending my time going around trying to fight the denial and get people to realize that there are perpetual models that they can lean on, that they can take their police department back and don't have to worry about whatever perspective you're coming from. If you're conservative and you want less government, great. That's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about a goal towards abolition. Less government. We're talking about less intrusion into your life. If you're a libertarian, we're talking about ending the drug war, ending prostitution being anything that's a consensual adult agreement. We don't want to put people in prison cells for. And if you're the big liberal or progressive and you want to rely on science and you want to rely on empathy, this works the exact same way as well. No matter what your approach, the idea that you would control the service you get is fundamentally what has to be in place. It's the only thing that's logical. Right now, you guys are all going to McDonald's, ordered a hamburger, paying for a hamburger, and your mayor's handing you a salad saying, well, we decided that a salad was better. And we're all just taking the salad and walking away like it was all fine. And it's not fine. You know, we paid for that hamburger. We deserve the damn hamburger. So let's demand the hamburger. And that's all. I got to get to it.
No, I love it. And thank you. But I think just to close out, I think what you were saying about having the community start to set the standard of what is needed, because also it's communities that actually know what is even going on. People know when they have a buy-in, when they have an input into what's happening, it just makes for more effective processes overall. I just think back to being a kid and, things like the PAL and things like that. When you had these different, partnerships and interactions, when people were working towards common goals together, there seems to be instances where you had, better action happening, I guess, for lack of a better phrasing.
But I mean, that's the thing, is we're actually arguing about a bunch of stuff that's already been scholarly proven. So my model is based off of stakeholder theory that we use in the business world all around this country to great success in our world-leading organizations. I'm just talking about doing the exact same thing to what you're paying for, the business that you own. Right,
exactly. Especially when we, the taxpayers, we are the stakeholders, we are investing and paying for this service that occurs. Well, I mean, thank you so much. I appreciate you for taking time out on your Friday evening to come and talk with us. And definitely, you guys, if you don't already follow Michael on Twitter, definitely follow him. There's some great resources and stuff on his website. And like you said, he's tweeted out information about his model. I mean, there's a lot of great information and good people out there, and Michael's definitely someone to check out. And don't start harassing him about how you know him so much more than he does, because he's not going to. He will engage you in dialogue, but he's not going to sit there. He's going to take his break and walk away from Twitter for a little bit.
For better or for worse.
But I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much
for joining
us.
Having me.
Appreciate it.
So that is the end of that's our very first panel on, entering the world of systemic racism, police violence, and many of the issues that we have seen as an outgrowth of the Black Lives Matter movement over the past few years. But as we've talked about, this has historical underpinnings in the country itself. And things are cyclical, right? I mean, like I said, when you look back at the readings of Du Bois, when you look back at James Baldwin and many others, Dr. King, some of the same battles that we thought were already fought and won, we're relitigating with just a different medium today. And we're going to continue tentatively. Our next panel is set for 2 weeks from tonight. We're doing these on Friday nights, primarily because this is when, Ben's off, so we have the channel. Yeah, the kids get to play when dad's away. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed the conversation that happened between us this evening. And please continue to share, to build, to have discussions. I mean, we've been reaching out. If you have suggestions, people who you think might be good for channels, let us know. Hit us up and let us know. Definitely, we've been, like I said, we've been casting our net wide. And these are issues we're going to keep talking about. You know, I know some people are like, well, everyone just needs to get along, or we just need to all respect each other. I absolutely agree and concur with everything Dr. Johnson said and Michael said as well. Yes, we do need to respect each other, but that's one, it's a two-way street. And two, you need to understand what it means to be respectful. Saying to someone in the midst of their personal grief and strife that the way you're expressing yourself is disrespecting me, or it's not even it's hurting my feelings, is not being respectful for the experience and the process that other person or that group of people is going through. And yes, I'm most definitely referring to President Obama and statements about respecting military families' feelings in terms of Colin Kaepernick and other protesting during the national anthem and even the Pledge of Allegiance. That's another conversation for another day, but it's the fact that we can't even understand why, when someone is saying that I'm not going to continue to give false allegiance to this symbolism, when we don't have in reality liberty and justice for all. We can pay homage to symbolic gestures, but we can't address the reality that what we're holding up as this pinnacle and idea does not actually exist. That's the issue. Not that someone is disrespecting the service that someone's family. It reminds me, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the miniseries, The 60s. NBC used to do those, Sunday nightly movies or Monday nightly movies, whatever, but they did a miniseries, The 60s. And I remember, you had the one son that went off to the Vietnam War. You had the other son that was a hippie protester. And I think like in one scene, they do it's like a Kent State type of student protest. And one of the things they were saying is, we're not against the soldiers, we're just against the war. That's the same type of thing here. We're not against, your family members. I think back to my stepfather, who is a former Black Panther, but he's also a retired Marine. Well, not retired Marine, but he was a Marine. He was in Vietnam, and he came back very radicalized. Why? Because so many of us have grandparents, have parents who were either in World War II or Vietnam or the Korean War, who went over there, who saw the brutalization of other people, and then came home and saw the brutalization of their own. 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, they're seeing the brutalization continue in their children and grandchildren. So please save me the false equivalencies. I don't have time for that. None of us do. And it doesn't do us any disservice. It doesn't do us any service at all. In fact, it does us a disservice, and we're not having honest conversations. So we had a very honest conversation here tonight, and we're going to continue doing this. And I hope you guys will join us. Like I said, please share this video for those who may not have seen it. If you have any comments, questions, thoughts, ideas, hit us up. You can email me directly at thewayofanoa@gmail.com. Yeah, so we're out. Have a great rest of the weekend, everybody, and talk to you guys next week. Peace.